All right, it's Wednesday. It is the first day of summer. So I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. Let me do some preliminary and do some introductions. My name is George Buck. I'm filling in for Mike Gibb. Mike has I believe, son graduated from high school today, so that's where he is. And I want to welcome you to today's webinar on why collection agencies must leverage voice AI technology, stories from early adopters. Artificial intelligence comes in many shapes and sizes. Voice AI empowers companies in the accounts receivable management industry to be more efficient by allowing them to automate debt collection calls, both inbound and outbound. Leveraging those efficiencies can make agencies significantly more profitable at a time when margins have never been tighter. In this webinar sponsored by Skit.ai, a panel of experts will share the benefits they have gained by deploying voice AI solutions to show you why you should consider it also. Headquartered in New York, Skit.ai is the leading conversational voice AI platform in the accounts receivable industry, enabling collection agencies to streamline and accelerate revenue recovery. Skit.ai's compliant, configurable, and easy to deploy conversational voice AI platform is enabling enterprises to automate nearly 1 million consumer conversations weekly. They have been recognized by Forbes 30 Under 30, Asia 2021, and have received several award recognitions, including Disruptive Technology of the Year 2022 by CCW, Stevie Bronze winner for 2022 by the International Business Awards, and the the G's got me there, but the Gold Globally CEO Awards of 2022. Scott, if you need to correct me on that, please correct me on that.
You're doing great, George.
Thanks again to Scott or to Skit.ai for sponsoring today's webinar. Please check them out on the website. You'll see it there in your chat. Let me tell you a little bit about today's speakers. Scott Carroll is the business lead for collections at Skit.ai. He is a collection industry executive with over 30 years of operations experience, having worked on the credit grantor and debt collection agency side of the business. Scott has managed very large collection entities and was a COO president at a collection agency for over 18 years. He has streamlined processes and enhanced compliance while embracing technology, always striving to have the finest of operations. Anthony Bertacano is the president and CEO of Trans Financial Company's Credit Recovery and Management Systems. Trans Financial is a collection agency located in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Go Tigers. They have been in business since 1992. Trans Financial Companies collect debts for hospitals and other providers in the healthcare industry. Russell Warden is the Chief Executive Officer of Same Day Auto Finance. With a background in lending, regulation, and operation, Russell rose through the ranks from an analyst role to that of a Chief Operating Officer in 2022, where he uncovered the need for technological advancements within the company. Russell has begun the process of modernizing Same Day's operations and was promoted to CEO officer in 2023. The format for today's event will be a panel discussion. Everyone is encouraged to submit questions and we will get to them during the course of our conversation today. To submit a question, please either enter it into the chat module or click the QA tab on your Zoom webinar control panel. Thanks for being here today. Please be sure to submit your questions and we'll get to them during the course of our conversation today. Gentlemen, I'll take a breath and we'll start with our dialogue. I'm curious, from a leader standpoint, what sparked your initial interest into AI? Where did you begin and how did you migrate into where you are today with the use of artificial intelligence? Anthony, you want to go first?
Sure. I can't remember. We started the relationship right before the end of 2022. I can't remember if I got a marketing email or how the connection started, but of course, AI is all over the news. It's in the forefront of technology now. And we were looking at it as a way to mitigate the challenges that we're having with collector staffing, collector performance, collector retention, and not that it's necessarily replacing or fixing all of those issues, but it certainly helps a lot in those areas. It is the onboarding process with Skit has been, whenever you're bringing on a new vendor, you're going to have challenges, and especially in this area where it's so technical. But the collaborative effort that we've had with Skit.ai has been exceptional, onboarding them as a vendor.
Russell, what got you started looking at the benefits and the value to artificial intelligence, and where are you all today with that?
And so historically, I've used some of these technologies in my personal life. So there's some services that can make reservations for you and that sort of thing. And then we were having troubles with sort of the tight labor market, rising delinquencies in the auto portfolio. And so we're looking at how can we sort of bolster our contact efforts to try to remind customers, hey, you owe us a payment. And I got a marketing email from Skit, said, oh, this looks interesting. And so I sort of went through the process, and like Anthony said, it was, they're very collaborative, helped us get up to speed pretty fast. And the main goal was, hey, regardless of whether there's, an HR issue, a storm, or, someone quits unexpectedly, we have a backup plan to sort of at least contact the customers in those situations. And so far, it's filled that need fabulously.
Good. Scott, I'm going to throw this your way, but I'm going to segue into it. I don't know who all has watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Prime Video, but in season 2, don't remember the episode, but Al, I think, is the dad's name. He goes to work for Bell Laboratories. And I believe the reference date for that period of time was 1959. And one of his projects is artificial intelligence. Now, I don't know what the history is of artificial intelligence, but I'm going to kind of throw it over to you and just kind of let you give us maybe a background or a little bit of history of artificial intelligence, where it started and where it's come to.
I don't entirely know, but I do know that I think that we're really seeing the interest more recently. I don't really know that a lot of us know much about where the history of artificial intelligence is, and especially with that reference. But where I think it's come to, at this point, is how it can be functional in business. And so if we look at technology as a whole, right, when some of us were really young, we didn't have a lot of these technologies that we have now. And when you hear about even the advent of the computer or the internet and how that goes all the way back, right, to a much earlier decade than, we really didn't become familiar with it until sometime in the early 80s. But it had been around, home computing hadn't been around, but computing had been around for a long time. And the internet was, devised long before that, before it became popular. So I'm sure that there's some history to AI that I probably should know more about, but don't, if I'm confessing. But where I do think we see is that it's coming now to a point where we're becoming more aware of it, like we became aware of computing and we became aware of the internet, and it factors into our lives, just as computing and the internet did. AI is now making an appearance on our scene. So I'm sure it's been around a good deal of time and probably had different iterations before it became, what it's known to be now. Obviously, I think in the past year with ChatGPT and things, and news stories about AI in general, we're becoming more aware of its existence, and then leave it to humans, right, to be a little more applicable when they hear about technology and new ideas, and then iterate that into different ways of applying it. No surprise at all, it would come to collections. It's coming to just about all of our facets of life. But then if you look at business, it's coming into business. So I don't really know the exact history of it. I probably should study that better. But what I do know is that as humans, we take these things, we take this technology, we change it, and we put it to our needs, and we adapt it perfectly well. And I'm sure we're going to see so many more advances of it. But in collections and for phone calling, we're seeing that we're able to apply it at, with language models that are learning and growing and understanding. We're automating calls, we're augmenting the customer experience, and we are giving businesses the opportunity to make more money than they were able to when they're fighting their margins, crushing client fees, which make it really difficult for agencies to make money. The rising cost of employment, which, I mean, both Russell and Anthony mentioned the challenges in getting people, right? They talked about the rising debt and, performance needs, as well as, finding people. And so it's a scalable opportunity to really address these tough business challenges. And that's what I hear on a regular basis from people that we speak with. So I think that we're going to see AI continue to make its entrance, further into business. I mean, in every facet of business. But as we talk about conversational AI, we're going to see it improve even far, beyond where we are today.
Russell and Anthony, I'll throw this out to both of you. You went into this, you bought a platform, artificial intelligence platform. What would you do different today as far as onboarding that? I think a lot of times where we get, at least in my experience, a lot of the sometimes disillusionment or frustration comes from not doing a good enough job onboarding a particular platform. And in this case, would you do anything different in your onboarding process, your implementation process?
Russell, you want to speak to that
Yeah.
first, and then I certainly can as well.
Yeah, onboarding for us was pretty simple because I'm fairly technical, and so the data they need, I can write queries and get out the database, that sort of thing. I think the main thing I would change is just figuring out quicker, sort of what is the best cadence to send the data, receive the data, notate the accounts, that sort of thing. And so it took us, probably a few weeks to sort of get in the rhythm of reliably sending, receiving the data, notating our systems. But in general, it was, in terms of my vendors, it was probably one of the easiest get up to speed experiences I've had. It was as long as you're able to provide them the data they need, they're able to pretty much take it from there.
And I'm very similar to your experiences, Russell. I can write SQL queries, and I do a lot of. I'm a technical guy and an operations guy, as you are, and I believe in using technology to reduce FTEs and manage your book of business in the best way possible. The onboarding process was very streamlined with Skit. If I had an issue, they were very receptive, and they were asking the right questions. They wanted to make the platform and the model better. I had some suggestions that I brought to those guys about voicemail, about housing the data longer for incoming calls that were part of an outbound campaign. And those guys just were Johnny on the spot. They were, yeah, that's a great idea. Hey, let's do this. And I'm in a lot of spaces. So they're doing early out for me, which is we're acting in as the provider in that space, and also our bad debt space. And so we were setting up different bots to handle things differently. And then especially in the early out space, we're having to set it up for that particular client. So we're, doing different scripts and implementing different bots. I will say that when I did the demo with Skit, a lady with Skit named Anna, we got into the demo and it wasn't this it was polished, but she was trying to throw it off. She was challenging the bot. She was trying to make the bot make a mistake. And it was pretty impressive for me that Skit was trying to throw the bot off, and the bot was able to respond and handle the different scenarios appropriately. I'll also say that, hey, our backstop is they can always transfer to an agent.
Mhm.
You know, if the consumer is not interacting with the bot the way the consumer wants to interact or doesn't want to interact with a bot, they can always transfer to the agent. And so we have that backstop that we know is going to be able to positively affect our customer service with our consumers. So,
Scott, conversely, from Skit's point of view, how would you suggest somebody in Russell and Anthony's chair? What would be your suggestion to them in terms of vetting and deciding on a platform such as Skit? What are the key questions a person needs to ask?
Well, I think that, and I think both Russell and Anthony know this. I think it's important to state what your problems are as a business and what problems you are looking to address and overcome. And this can't be an effort on Skit.ai's part to just go out and tell you what your problems are and propose solutions. That's just like throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. It really is a matter of stating what your challenges are and then taking ownership, right? Taking ownership of the discussion. Just like Russell and Anthony both said, they were able to say what they needed. And, Russell talked about the cadence, and that's a really great example. They have very specific needs. They've got compliance requirements that are, not only important to regulators, but important to them personally and important to their business. The cadence, how often Russell would like to sync up data is entirely up to Russell. And that needs to be to his agreement and to his liking. Same with Anthony. So I think that that's what's important to do, is to make sure that when you're talking to any vendor, let alone Skit.ai, is that you are getting the service that you feel that you deserve. And, when it comes to getting service from our company, you should expect that you're going to get what you need to get. And if you can't get what you need to get, then you probably shouldn't do business, together. I mean, I'm really frank about that because, as a collection guy, I've had a lot of vendors myself, and I could be pretty demanding of my vendors. And I think I was like that a little bit on purpose, but I needed to know that they had my back and that we were in a partnership. And so I probably wear that term out a little bit, but when I'm speaking to agencies, I tell them we're looking to engage in a partnership with you and not just be a vendor, but we really want to help accomplish what their goals are. So that if they make their goals clear and what it is that they're trying to solve for, then that's really the best way to vet a vendor.
I appreciate that answer because I was much the same way. The thing that I take away from what you just said is it's a shared expectation. I have expectations of you as the vendor. What are your expectations of me as the client?
Right.
And I think that's a fair shake on both parties, that I need to allow my vendor to have certain expectations of me, because otherwise, how can I help them help me be successful? Anything, I see you nodding your head to that. I guess you've had that same experience.
I have, and I got to tell you, of any vendor I've ever, and I'm in this for 30 years, they are above par. I mean, they have been a great vendor to interact with. I interact with these guys all the time because, as you said, we have a common goal here, and it's got to be win-win, and I have to get the ROI out of the deal. And they excel in their customer service and their interaction as a vendor. They just do. They're fabulous.
Great. Russell, I'll shift over to you. I know we all look at dashboards. We all have KPIs, key performance indicators. What have you seen in terms of improvement in some of the things you look at in your dashboards or your KPIs in particular that came about from your use of artificial intelligence? Have you got anything you can share along those lines?
Yeah, the main benefits for all us were there's this sort of concept known as a gap, or you have a customer and they owe you money, but you haven't spoken to them in 6 days. It's not where you want to be, right? And so the Skit sort of made it where we have no gaps anymore. The only gaps that exist are purposeful, right? It's like the customer, we're not supposed to speak to them for some reason. And so Skit's been very helpful for that. And then also Skit gets through our entire list of accounts, within 30 minutes or so, whereas that would take a human a day and a half. And so we're able to sort of generate a lot of sort of calls, which then generate a lot of inbound calls. And so, and inbound calls are sort of my favorite kind of call because they usually want to pay, right? So as our agents spend a lot of time calling numbers that don't answer, what's been very beneficial is, you sweep the portfolio and then the rest of the day you're getting calls back on sort of people who got the missed call and they're trying to make the payment. And so now the agent's not having to spend time finding the person who's going to answer. They're getting the right party contact much easier. And that's really been sort of the two main benefits in terms of metrics. I'm sure there are other benefits, but we've had some issues with our payment processor, not Skit. And so we haven't been able to tie everything exactly as we would like, but it's clear the sort of the gapping has been reduced. The inbounds are better. And the collectors actually, that for whatever reason, they can tell when it's a Skit call because the way it's forwarded, it looks different in the phone system. And they get very excited when they see those calls because they're like, oh, this is going to make my scorecard look good. This is going to be easy payment to collect. So it's really benefited from those inbound calls.
Anthony, what about your operation?
Yeah, it's very similar. As far as the outbound volume that Skit can provide, we actually have had to get them to help us or ask them to pace it down. But Scott's right. You're blasting a lot of calls, and we have to watch the transfer rate, and then we have to watch because they're coming back. We're using 3 platforms. We're using Skit for its AI purpose. We have our call center 5.9 platform. We're dropping voicemails, and we're running these campaigns exclusively. We've got regulatory issues where we don't want to violate a 7 and 7 rule or some other things. And but the ability to touch these accounts and get these touches has been exceptional. And Scott's right. It's generating a big inbound call volume. It's the transfers. And we had some issues, and it was not Skit with the API process with our payment vendors, but that's been resolved, and we're moving past that, so that the consumer has the ability to make a payment strictly within the bot via a text message, and hopefully not have to make it to a human agent. Like I said, we always have the backstop that they can transfer to that, but we're trying to use the AI platform to keep them from having to reach a human being and to offer payment options and to process the payments.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. What a lot of people are concerned about when we move into something like this, and that is the agent. How is this going to impact the agent? What is going to be the agent's attitude about this? Are you taking calls away from me? Are you impacting my income? What's been the impact on your agents?
From our perspective, at first agents were scared. They're like, "What, are you getting a robot army to replace us?" And of course, our agents hadn't really used anything like this before or seen anything like this before. But then once it got going and they realized, they're paid an incentive based on their performance, and those inbound calls really make it easier for them to hit those targets. And that was a benefit. So now they look forward to the bot running. So they get upset when it's not running.
Good.
And I agree with Russell. We of course are bonusing our agents, and with everybody getting squeezed the way we are trying to, if we can mitigate some of the bonus costs by letting the AI platform handle the payments. It's just where we are. But with the right party contacts, the transfers, and the incoming calls, and the agents being the backup, it's better for them as well. It's because there's just, we're collecting more money overall, so they're getting a bigger piece, as are we. It's just better for everybody.
Well, has your FTE count stayed about the same? Have you had to increase or have you decreased staff? What's been the impact from AI on that?
What we've done is maybe shift things a little bit better, because of the challenges with collectors. We were more or less boxed into having to hang on to people that were lower performing people. This has enabled us to bring in newer talent and let go of people without us having to worry about servicing our business. Russell, is that?
Yeah, I would say, especially for us, we're a somewhat small team. And so, you know, if you're in a call center of 1,000 people, if you have an issue with 1 or 2 employees, you have sort of the numbers. But with a small company like us, one of our major issues is you have to be overstaffed to anticipate any, like, you know, random, so someone quits, someone has an issue with their car or whatever. And one of the things that Skit's allowed us to do is we can run a little bit leaner, where we haven't really like necessarily replaced the key position, but maybe we don't have to keep that extra position just to be safe, because we know at the end of the day, we have at least an ability to make those calls and get those inbound calls to the agents who are working. And so, you know, if say, for example, we have, you know, a Dallas ice storm again and half the office can't come to work, we know we can get through the list first. And then if we just have 1 or 2 people manning the inbound calls, that's going to be much more productive than it would have been otherwise. And so for us, we're maybe down 1 FTE, so maybe like, you know, I don't know, 10% or so. But the main benefit is just not keeping an extra FTE you really didn't need, but you were doing it just to be safe. And it sounds like Anthony's in the same place.
Yeah.
Scott, are you seeing anything different across your client base or across the industry?
No, I'm seeing this. And so that's what's good. I mean, my thought on that is what we're really looking to do is to augment an agency's staff and capabilities and resources. We're not looking we're not out to totally replace, you know, all human beings. Now, that doesn't mean that some small operations haven't been able to do that, you know, almost entirely, you know, by just having just a few people around. But, you know, that's our aim isn't to go out and get rid of the debt collector. That's not our goal. Our goal is to help agencies, you know, and companies to augment their processes, reallocate some resources. I mean, you know, you're going to have some of your really good collectors that you might want on some specific projects, or, you know, listen, this industry is not short of really intelligent people coming up with really good strategies. I mean, there will be different ideas. If we were to have this conversation 6 months from now, we will probably hear about some different ideas and strategies that agencies were running that we're not thinking about right now or even talking about. That is what I think this brings to people is, you know, these opportunities. So it's not about getting rid of people. It's about augmenting the resources you currently have and just doing better. I mean, having 100% penetration like Russell talked about, that's, I mean, you can't, I don't know how else you can get that. And that's a really great thing to have.
That's great feedback, Scott. Thank you. We got a couple of questions in the Q&A. What kind of numbers are you using for the Skit caller ID? Do they appear local? Who wants to respond to that? Don't make me pick somebody.
I'll go first, but from what I can tell, I haven't checked recently, but I think it's not using a local number. I think it's using a New York number. They've offered to change it if we needed, but we've never pursued that. So, but because the bot doesn't call me, I don't quite remember what zip code it's calling from.
It's in our case, it's using toll-free numbers, and I do insert myself as a record in some of my files because I'm wanting to make sure that something is not, the rails are not coming off somewhere with a consumer taking care of our consumers and a customer service aspect. I'm sure that those guys, because they've adapted to every idea that I've had to throw at them, if it made sense for their, not just me, but their customer base. But we have not had an issue with the toll-free number, caller ID being an issue. I mean, we're making the penetration, we're getting the transfers, we're getting the callbacks. I can get into all the granular numbers of the metrics, but it's all about the money. It's all about the promises to pay, the payment plans, and the payments getting made. And that ROI has been way, way far better than I even expected.
But by using the New York number, are you running a risk of spoofing?
Yeah, and that was the concern. That's why we sort of were thinking about it, but it's on the backlog right now. So we're working on trying to get the payment processor piece fixed first, and then we'll worry about sort of the area codes.
Okay, good. Another question: our incoming calls were greater at the beginning than they are now. Have you all noticed the same? And maybe a follow-up to that is, wonder why that is, and maybe we can help this person. And maybe, Scott, that's where you can jump in, but that's the question. Or have you noticed that the incoming calls are greater in the beginning than they are now? No?
No, I mean, the performance of the model, as I said, we're using other platforms, we're doing different things. And going back to what Scott said a little while ago, that, we can target things in different ways with all of our platforms to try and get different results and different penetration and, a different call appearance to the consumer. But no, the transfers, the success of the model, the success of the Skit.ai platform has been stable.
Scott, how would you respond to that person? What would you suggest they do?
Yeah.
Maybe reaching back out to Skit for help on that.
Yeah, it seems to me that it would be good to talk about whether we need to just switch up the number. I mean, sometimes if someone's seeing that same number over and over again, you're not going to have the same level of inbound again. So I think, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But I think that is certainly worth the discussion, and hopefully, if they haven't reached out to us quite yet on that, let's do that, and let's explore what the situation is and qualify that.
Yeah, I think it's always good to run samples side by side, do parallel analysis of things. So maybe change your number and don't change your number on a certain segment. So I think there's always good ways to kind of test against what you're trying. Boy, we're getting a lot of questions all of a sudden. Do you have any experience with AI and accounts that need skip tracing?
Yeah, so for us, for skip tracing, that's sort of what the humans do, right? So the bot will call the numbers we have on file, but in terms of trying to find new numbers, or we leave that to the humans, because we don't want to violate any rules and contact people we shouldn't. But the benefit is, if the bot's making this many calls, the human has more time to skip trace, right? And so it comes back to what Scott was talking about, augmenting. So before they would have just been dialing many more hours of the day to get through the list. Now it's a little bit shorter, and they have time to sort of dig into all those data sources and try to find, how can I get in touch with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And we're using vendors for our skip tracing and our new numbers and addresses, et cetera, et cetera. But with that data, we're launching those calls outside of Skit.ai, because you need to be careful about how you're dialing those numbers and how you're connecting to those numbers, and you need it. And if it's a wrong number, there's just some regulatory issues. So when we get new skip tracing information back, we're using our third-party platform. Five9 is what we use, but we're using that, and we have human beings working those accounts and trying to connect to those. That's just not something I feel comfortable blasting out there with a bunch of skip trace phone numbers.
Yeah,
And that's what it comes down to, right? It comes down to a comfort level, because you could blast them out for a call or two to see if those are actual connects, right? To find out those numbers are valid numbers at all. But that's where the brilliance of the industry comes in. And people get clever and they go, well, wait a minute, I can reallocate my resources, like Russell and Anthony are saying, I can reallocate, I can have Skit, .ai contacting these numbers, these are, not new skip finds. And, I can have these guys over here, my good skip guys, really working to dig in and get the big balance skip hits.
It's what Russell said. You're able to allocate, and what you just said, Scott, you're able to allocate those resources that really need a human being involved, because Skit frees up the other lists. So you're able to dedicate more time to working the things that require a human being to be involved with, because Skit's got your back on the other list that you're trying to get through.
Monica has offered some feedback to the earlier question about inbound calls or calls not hitting. She's saying, what about spam issues? Have you checked whether the telcos are listing your numbers as spam, or the collection agencies registering the numbers as their own? And I think that's a great point. And it's not going to get any easier with what the FCC's just recently come out with. So have you run your numbers through a call cert program? Anyway, there are services out there, and I think any of us would be happy to respond off of this in terms of who some of those vendors are that can get your numbers cleared through the different telcos. There's several out there. Another question, do you require consumer consent in order to make an outbound bot call? Interesting. That's a compliance question, and none of us are attorneys.
None of us are attorneys. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to say, we at Skit.ai recommend, that the agency understand the agreement that they have with their client, that their client has with their consumer. That consent is typically found in their agreement with the consumer. And so, yeah, we recommend that consent, be the guide there in terms of using this technology.
That's correct. It's not the platform that becomes the consent issue. It's whether you should be making the call to the consumer or not. Yeah. And whether that's going to be in your list. And if it's a do not call or you don't have consent, I don't care what the vehicle is to make the call, you shouldn't be making the call. So it's not a Skit issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Skit is actually pretty good. If a customer tells the bot that they don't want to be contacted, the bot reports that to us. So we get a list of, hey, customer XYZ requests they don't get these kind of calls anymore.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, because I'm very risk adverse. And thank you. I had a call with a attorney out in California for a client I'm working with, because they're thinking they don't need consent. And I'm trying to say, look, let's get consent, but let's make sure our client has consent, or if not, we need to get consent. And I just wanted the legal opinion to back me up on that. And yeah, I'm a firm believer in consent. All right, what kind of connectivity rate are you getting? Is it what you expected? Scott, what do you, when you all offer your product, what are you saying connectivity? Are you offering anything in terms of what the expectation should be with connectivity rates? So I'll post it there first, and then kind of get Russell and Anthony to give their feedback on their connectivity rates.
Yeah, so we try to manage the expectation there, George. And the reason we do that is because everybody's got different kinds of business, right? They've got different age of business, different, types of portfolios. So that makes it a little bit harder to commit upfront to what that success rate's going to be in connectivity. So we try to give a bit of a range. I think it's, I sometimes think that we're trying to be conservative and, and approach it so that we don't want anybody to be super surprised and disappointed if it didn't go the way that we're trying to set it up. So, I think, as time wears on, we're going to get closer to that number, by portfolio type and by age and things, but we generally we generally, we speak in generalities, right now. And I think Russell and Anthony, they can speak more specifically to what their rates have been. But yeah, we try to keep it pretty general, just based on, those factors.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer and a great segue, guys. Have you seen lifts in your recovery rates?
We have. It goes back to what Scott was saying. I mean, it depends on the list you're running. If I'm running a low credit score list and just trying to touch these accounts that probably I wouldn't even want to touch using a human collector, it's able to go through those lists. And of course, that's going to be a lower response rate. It's like when a potential client asks me, well, how much can you collect?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a lot that goes into that. So it's the different characteristics of a list. But in general, connectivity is certainly improved by using this platform, greatly improved.
And plus you get the efficiencies and the
Correct.
cost and the cost benefits. So yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, for us, the connectivity is roughly equivalent to what the human agents do. So, we're dealing with almost exclusively low credit score people. And so the difference for us is how delinquent are they? Because at a certain point, they start trying to not answer the phone, right? If they know they're 4 payments behind or something, they're just hiding the vehicle at that point or whatever. They're not interested in speaking to us. They don't expect to pay the bill. And so, but when we sort of, break up our list based on sort of delinquency stage in terms of severely delinquent, mildly delinquent, and we compare that against the human performance, it's roughly similar. So the difference is that, the human performance gets that connectivity through hours of work, whereas, the bot calls all these accounts within, 30 minutes or an hour. And so the connectivity rate's about the same, but the speed you get that connectivity is a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Scott, there's a question here. Does Skit do any waterfall work on the front end for you all, or Anthony, do you and Russell go outside to other vendors to do your waterfalls in terms of numbers and addresses?
Yeah, so we don't provide any skip tracing data. We're just providing the technology for the dials and, for the conversation.
Okay. One question, what changes are you looking at making going forward in terms of how you utilize artificial intelligence as you get more sophisticated with it, more educated with it? Where do you see yourselves being, say, in 180 days from now in terms of how you use it? What way will you change any strategies or the way you currently use it?
Well, I'll say this, that, we onboarded them at the beginning of the year, and it's kind of been, I think Russell referenced this, that it's been a growing together collaborative process to learn from each other how to best utilize the platform. And I think we're still in that process of how we build the list and how we're using our other platforms and how we move accounts around and what the characteristics of those accounts are. But it's a great tool to have. It's a good arrow in the quiver because you got a lot of stuff going on. Going back to the waterfall, that's not what they're there for. You have other vendors that are there for you. We're using, we have a call branding, with our numbers. And as Russell said, we haven't not gotten there yet with worrying about using a local number because we're still growing with them. But as I said, I do put my own record into these files so that if I get a call and I see a spam label on it and it has not happened with Skit and their phone numbers yet, I'm going to know that something's going on with their outbound caller ID and their call branding.
For us, and I don't want to pressure Skit, but we deal with a lot of Spanish-speaking customers. Mm-hmm. So my hope would be in the future, and Skit sort of, we've been working on this, but in the future, handling those bilingual customers better. Because we're in Texas and we have a range of people. It's people who is a pretty small minority that do not speak English. Then you have some people who are more comfortable in Spanish, and then you have some people who are sort of in the middle, right? And so one of ours is probably going to be better able to target which language the sort of recipient of the call receives.
Yeah.
Other than that, sort of, you get the recordings of Skit, so you get to listen to sort of what the bot's doing. And so we sort of listen, try to get some ideas of can you tweak things? Like literally today, I got an email from the Skit team said, hey, we've heard that such and such voice has such and such better improvement. Can we run an A/B test to see if this voice will work better? And so it's sort of a continual improvement where you sort of find, okay, this is working okay. How can we sort of adapt it? And so for example, with us, like I mentioned, we had some issues with our payment processor working out. So I worked with the team. I said, okay, until we get the payment processor on board, let's change the way the bot reacts when a promise happens, right? And so let's route that call differently because I want to get them on the phone with the human. And so Skit's very good at sort of being proactive about some of those things like the voice. And then when you bring the ideas up, like Anthony said, they're very receptive to say, hey, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's put that in the system. Let's test it. And there's been a couple of times where I say, hey, should we test this? And they're like, Russell, that's probably a third or fourth level priority. Let's focus on the bigger stuff first. And so they're very good at sort of helping us improve. And so I don't really know what we'll be doing other than hopefully Spanish calls, but it's just sort of a constant sort of tweaking and try to find what works. And we try different times of day. What happens if we do it in the mornings? What happens if we do it in the evenings, midday, that kind of stuff. And so we're just sort of iterating to figure out what may work in the future.
What kind of feedback are you getting from your consumers, and then for that matter from your clients? Are you getting any feedback? Do you do any type of questionnaire at the end of a call? What are you getting any feedback from that?
So the feedback we get is mostly when the humans call and speak to someone who spoke to the bot, and you get a wide range of responses. Generally, it's positive because the good thing is, as you can imagine, a lot of these calls are tense, right? Especially for people who are severely delinquent. The good thing is the bot never loses its temper. The bot never gets mad at you, right? And so I think it's some of these recordings I've heard people are yelling at the bot, right? And the bot's just like, okay, I'm transferring you to an agent now, And so part of it is just no matter how much you try to goad the bot into misbehaving, sort of like Anthony was saying in his demo, the bot does not respond. It either just gives you to a human or it just keeps trying to get the payment. And so some of our customers have been like, hey, we got this call from your digital assistant. Who is this? And we sort of explain it to them. And then of course the later stage delinquent customers, they just complain. They're like, we're getting so many calls from you now. Like, can you stop calling us? It's like, well, if you make your payment and set up this plan, then we can stop making the collection efforts, And so overall, we haven't had much negative feedback. I think we've had maybe one or two people specifically opt out of getting the calls, but the rest of the consumers treat it like a regular collection call.
Good.
I
think as consumers, we're becoming more and more accustomed to dealing that way. And I know for one, I still wrote checks up to about 2 years ago before I finally got up in the modern world and did drafts. So I think we're becoming more accustomed. Question in the Q&A, do you have any statistics on how many contacts actually provide the authentication just to start chatting with the bot? Are you able to track that?
You are.
Yeah, you can track that because we record the calls and we also have a transcript of the calls. So we've got a dashboard that will enable the agency or the user to see the call, in words as to what happened. And, then you can track, if you assign a code to that, you can even track that code in your system. So
And that data is in the output file that Skit provides to us after a campaign is run.
So if I'm currently using a call recording service, does this replace that?
Well, we don't use a call recording service because our vendors provide that integrated as Skit does. So it's not necessary, but because of our different lines of business and the data that we get from our clients, we have had to do different authentication methods depending on the data that's coming from the client. And Skit has been very adaptive to change the qualifiers that we use for the call verification for the right party contact.
Okay.
Yeah, in our case, every time we run a campaign with Skit, we get an email sort of summarizing what happened. And of course, we have the dashboard with the transcripts. And so it'll tell me, this many outbound calls, this many connections, this many right party contacts, this many wrong party contacts, this many sort of promises to pay, this sort of stuff. And so it sort of measures, who's authenticating, who's getting through and being the right party contact, who maybe answered and it was the wrong person. And so sort of it summarizes that stuff for you, but then you also can log in the dashboard and get the details.
The person circled back with a question. Are you willing to share your stats in terms of authentication? And maybe you want to do that offline. I don't know if you'd want to do it over this webinar or not. I'll leave that to y'all. Maybe this person could reach out to y'all after that if you're willing to share. But I'll leave it to you on how you want to respond to that.
Well, again, it's going to depend on the strategy and the campaign that you're running. So, it's not a one size fits all constant. Not for us anyway, Russell. I mean, we're doing different things and we're targeting these accounts in different ways, and we're going to get different results depending on how we're constructing the campaign that we're running.
Yeah, and in our situation, like I said, we're dealing with low credit score borrowers who are delinquent, and so it ranges based on sort of the type of the customer, and also ranges on the delinquency. But in general, it's similar to what the humans are getting, right? So if we expect, early stage collector is going to make so many calls, they're going to make so many right party contacts, they're going to get so many promises, the bot is similar to those percentages. So and so it's performing similar to what the
And Anthony and Scott, I'll say this, I'm like you guys, I've been in this business a long time. And if you go back 20, 25, 30 years ago, we couldn't have these kind of conversations because we were so afraid of competition. Somebody was going to get into our space. I think it's changed today. And to the person that's asking these questions, I would imagine that if you wanted to reach out to Anthony and Russell personally, they'd be happy to have this conversation with you. I just think the industry has changed in terms of sharing that type of information. We're much more open to it today. There's plenty of business out there for all of us. So maybe that y'all can get into some more specifics with her if y'all were to connect personally. This person says, I got on a little late. How are you accepting payments with the virtual agent? No, Russell, you said you were having a little bit of problem with your payment vendor. How are you all handling that?
Yeah, so currently what happens is we have sort of a portal where a customer can go in and pay. And so the way the bot's currently working is, hey, I want to set you up on a payment. And then when they agree to make the payment, it texts them that link. But then the person can go in and sort of make the payment with the text. Now, it's not as direct as we would prefer, but it's sort of been our workaround until we can get the payment processor part up and running. And then whenever they want to make a payment and there's agents available, we get those calls just transferred to humans and then processed in the system. So if they want to make a promise to pay in the future, so they don't want to pay today, they want to pay Friday. If an agent's available, we transfer to the agent so they can schedule it, put it in the system, notate the account appropriately. So that's how we're currently handling it.
And that's what we're doing as well. It was not on Skit, it was our payment processor that we had some obstacles with. We're past that. But when we were ramping that up, we just had it transferred to an agent, and it comes into our incoming call phone tree. They have options to go to our website. They have options to do IVR payments. They have an option to talk to an agent and do a payment. So it's just like any other incoming call that would be generated off of a demand letter or anything else.
Scott, do you want to add anything to that? I'm sure you all have a lot of relationships with a lot of the different vendors where you both own or tie into different services out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, the texting of a link that goes to a portal is a great option. Passing the account to a live collector is an option, and, taking the payment right on the call is an option, with that integration with the payment provider. And, the gold is not losing a right party contact. That is a must. We must make sure that we're preserving that. So the experience needs to be nice and smooth. However that works for that agency or that user is what we want to vitally make sure that we're supporting.
Good. We got about 3 minutes left. I want to give each of each of you some time to kind of recap and give some final thoughts, and maybe give that one nugget to the audience that we had a lot of questions here we didn't get to once we put together. So the audience was great as far as offering questions to us. So Russell, if you want to start, then Anthony and Scott, I'll let you finish up. What one nugget, what one thought would you leave with this audience in terms of your experience with AI, and what maybe the audience should think about in terms of their use of AI?
Yeah, I think it's a very affordable way to cover your bases, make sure you're contacting the customers. And the sort of one nugget I give you to sort of come up is the payment processor. It's not Skit's problem, it's your vendor relationship. But the sooner you start that process, the sooner you can get that integration, which is super important. And so I would encourage you, sort of as you're going down, sort of exploring it, to sort of have those conversations in parallel with your other vendor. And it's, sometimes, like in our case, we did that. The vendors still, they don't really care, right? And so we'll keep pushing them, and we're making progress. But I would just make sure you don't lose sight of the fact that Skit's a great company, it's a great product, but you also want to make sure that payment processor is available to sort of integrate with them. And and I'm sure they integrate with most payment processors, but maybe there are some out there that don't integrate. And so you just want to find that out ahead of time, prepare accordingly.
And we had that same challenge. The good thing is, and we're using a pretty big payment processor. And it's not that they weren't responsive. They just, like everybody, they're just busy and have a lot on their plate. It certainly was not Skit. And Skit was, telling us, hey, we're trying to get this done with this guy. Can you reach out to him? So they were great with that challenge. And as they onboard these various payment processors, once they do it with one, it's not going to matter who the customer is, who the Skit customer is. They will have already had the payment integration with that vendor, and then it's going to be seamless. So the more they onboard their various clients that are interfacing with these various vendors, the more seamless it's going to be for Skit to handle on their side, but it's not an issue with them.
Scott, you get the final word.
Oh boy. Well, my big takeaway from this, hearing from two current clients, is the importance of listening to our clients and listening to the people that we're speaking with about the services that we provide. It's so important that we take a consultative approach. And I think Russell kind of alluded to that. We're working together. We want to establish a partnership with the people that we're working with. And we try to take a consultative approach. We want the feedback. We love the feedback. It makes us better. We don't think that we've arrived and we brought everybody the answer, but we believe we've got answers, and we've got ways to tackle the problems of attrition, and the challenges of finding people and retaining people. That kind of addresses the FTE issue. We can scale. I mean, the scalability is endless, and we can add to the efficiency in collections, and still offer that consumer another avenue, and to interact with the agency and not be embarrassed. For example, maybe some people have a hard time talking to a human collector. I did it for a number of years myself. Collecting. I wasn't always the nicest guy. But the bot is always nice. It's always even keel, and the iteration of it is even better than it was 6 months ago as a technology. So I think people are going to, I think, just test us, try us out, see if we're worth it, and give us a chance to show what we've got.
Scott, are y'all going to be at ACA in July?
We are.
All right, we'll see you there.
Sounds
Well, on behalf of Mike and accountrecovery.net, I want to thank the three of y'all. Y'all made my job so easy, and I appreciate that. Y'all are the rock stars. This is probably something we could easily go on another half hour or an hour. I'm sure Mike will want to have you back at some point. And again, if these guys are who I think they are, you're welcome to reach out to them. I'm sure they'll be glad to help you with anything or answer any questions. Again, thanks to Scott and Skit.ai. We appreciate you being here. But this concludes our webinar for today. I hope everyone has a great first day of summer, and we will see you again soon. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Fine. Thank you, George. Thank you, Anthony, Russell.